Hey guys and girls, welcome to the first webinar of 2024. Just before we get started, if we can just do a little IT check and make sure that everyone can hear us and see us, the audio and visuals working well, and we'll get into tonight's topics. Obviously, I'm here with Rose Renouf, which many of you would know, but there's a slide here. Here we go. Can't see me. All working good. All good. Beautiful. Josh, Josh, I think that there's something wrong at your end because everyone else is saying that they can see us and hear us. So, yeah.
Stephen McCormack is there.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks a lot for joining in, guys. And yeah, spending your Wednesday, I was going to say Tuesday night. I think it was a Tuesday night live, but here we are on a Wednesday for a webinar. So Joel just wrote in saying, all good, does this text work? Yes, I can see the questions as you put them into the comment section. So if you have any questions, pop them over. People won't see your questions apart from us. But yeah, send questions through. There's always get interesting stuff popping up on the screen. So today we're going to be talking about finance, the finance market, what's happening out there in the finance market, how to get ahead in 2024. You know, people think that you can't buy properties at the prices that we used to buy them and all that sort of stuff. So we'll jump straight into it. We've got a little agenda here of some of the topics that we're going to be talking about, and yeah, we'll get into it. So firstly, I'm going to hand it over to Rose. Rose, tell everyone who you are, what you do, and yeah, while we're here.
Hi, my name is Rose. I'm the head of Zinger Finance, and I have been a mortgage broker for 23 years.
23?
Only 23 years.
Only 23, okay.
Yes. So as a mortgage broker, I have seen everything, mostly, yeah. I think, from different types of borrowers, from self-employed, PAYG, contractor, trust, company lenders. So I can say I think I know a lot.
You do?
Yeah.
Just like, we would have known each other now for about 20 years, maybe 18, 19 years, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. When you were 18.
18, there we go. That was like 19 years ago or something. So
that's
there we go.
Yeah.
And I just think from my own personal journey, right? Like we've been talking about finance for me recently, and it's like I'm learning stuff every day. We're still growing and learning, right? So
we always continue to learn.
Yeah. So it's the level of it doesn't matter if someone's starting out with their first property, or someone's coming to you with a complex commercial sort of structure, or they're trying to get from one level to the next level. You've experienced lots of elements of finance.
Definitely, and also as a good mortgage broker, you have to go in sync with the lender's policy because it evolves all the time. So there are a lot of good things happening at the moment, lenders-wise, in terms of how their policy cater for self-employed, how to simplify income verification, what are they looking for with your in terms of income, and how negative gearing impacts it, and how does trust. Is it really advisable to you, or do you feel like I need to be a PAYG? Can I transition to a self-employed? That sort of stuff. Then we can. There are always a solution.
I often joke to the team, like I see people come to us and they're like, I want to build a portfolio of 20 properties. I want to do this, I want to do that. And then after their first property they buy, they decide to go and quit their job, or they go and become a self-employed, and it's like, well, you're out of the game now for 2 years. So that might be like, oh, I've been working at the same place for 20 years and I've just gone to contractor. It's still fine. I'm still a contractor. It's like, no, you just screwed yourself up. You've hurt yourself. And I joke about it. It's like if someone wants to change their relationship status, someone wants to have a child, someone wants to get married, they should be talking about it beforehand and planning for that beforehand, because it's ultimately going to impact you, good or bad. If you're changing it around, it can hurt you. So
yeah, definitely, because changing your situation, either your marital status, your employment, because obviously it comes with the verification of income. I think that needed to be addressed. Make sure plan it well. I mean, let's look at it like some of that in the middle of we're doing the application, and suddenly you leave your job whilst we are putting an application. That doesn't look good.
I've got a new job that pays more money though.
I said, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Just yesterday. But I said, didn't we just launch the application last week?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I know about that, I don't have a choice but to disclose that to the lender.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I get in trouble. Like what I know must be, if it is a credit critical, then that has to be disclosed to the lender.
Of course. I've got a question, Rose. Like you said, you've been a mortgage broker for 23 years now. Out of 23 years ago, like, was there many mortgage brokers back then? Or was it a relatively new thing?
Actually, there were a lot of mortgage brokers when I first started, because anyone could be a mortgage broker.
Okay.
And then I think it was brought in 2012 that they have to, obviously, you need to have the cert for, you need to have a diploma. Yeah. When I first started, anyone can just be a lender. It wasn't regularized. Really? Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, it's regulated. Okay. So only the quality mortgage broker are left. Okay. Yeah. So. Okay. I think it's good for the industry, because there are so many cowboys there as well.
I never knew that. There we go. What would be like the top 2 different things that you've seen change over the last 23 years?
I think we are more vigilant in terms of getting to know your client. Make sure that you look at their tolerance to risk, their expenses, and all these things needed to be ascertained, because you're borrowing money, and you, as a broker, I have the responsibility to ensure that they're able to service the loan, and also lead a quality life as well. Yeah. So I think know your client is very, very important, and I definitely do that. That's why, hence, when I have an appointment, I do ask a lot of questions. Sometimes you have it, I already pre-fill the form, but just the same, I need to confirm those information, and I may have to ask more questions, and dig more questions, because sometimes you have like, oh yeah, I did this and changed my employment, and I said I've now worked like fly in, fly out, that sort of stuff, and we need to take into account.
Yeah. Keep the questions coming through, guys. Stephen, I will come back to your question a little bit later, and we'll ask Rose on that, because that's very, very important question. So this one is an interesting one, right? So we'll get straight into interest rates, right? Because I always love to prognosticate as to where I see monetary policy going and what's happening out there in the interest rate market. I said at the start of last year, in 2023, that I would have expected to see an interest rate cut by the middle of 2023, which we didn't. However, what we've seen past that is only one interest rate increase in the late part of 2023.
November.
Yeah, November. And that was a change in monetary policy which occurred at the end of financial year last year. So if we look at where are we heading at in 2024, all the fundamentals are off the table. And the fundamentals that I want to talk about, there's something that only came to my attention today, and it was probably only 15 minutes ago, and I shared it in the Birch feed for those of you that are in the Birch feed, right? The RBA meets 11 times a year, and the 11 times a year that they meet is on the first Tuesday of every month, and they meet for 11 months of the year, excluding January. But moving forward in 2024, there's a new RBA governor. She kind of looks like, what's his name? The Kardashians did, Bruce Jenner. Right? She looks like him, right? Anyway, I'm not going there. But they've changed the schedule, right? And it's very concerning and interesting to me that this has occurred. So it says here the RBA is meeting. So they met on the first Tuesday of February, and then they are meeting in March.
17th of March.
18th. 18th. They're meeting for 2 days at a time, right? So normally they just meet for an hour, right? But why are they meeting and going over 2 days? That's very strange, folks. But they're meeting in March, they're meeting in May, they're meeting in June, they're meeting in August, September, no October, but November and December. So if you think about it, right, what are the months that are not meeting up? Well, March, they're meeting up. April, what happened in April, right? It ain't, you just choose not to turn up in April anymore, right? May, they're going to meet. June, they're going to meet. July, what happened to July, right? August, September, they're meeting. October, what happened to October? So you're missing out October, April, and July this year. So
April, July, October, yeah.
April, July, October. So that in itself is confusing because you're just in a position where you go, okay, they're going to meet this month up, down, no matter what. You know, some news is going to come out. But now you have to go, is it going to be on the 23rd of the month, the 5th and the 6th of the month, the 18th to the 19th, the 9th to the 10th of the month? You don't know when it's going to be, right? Because they've shuffled it up. And when they change these things, they're trying to hide things within the detail.
Is there any significance in why April, July, or October?
100%. They're the volatile months of the year, right? So when we look at central banks and recessions that have occurred, since like the 1920s stock market crashes, so the last 100 years, most market crashes occurred in October, September, October period, right?
So October 1987, that's very popular.
There you go, right? Any of them, it just happens at that point. And I find it interesting that this month is very crucial. Like March is very, very crucial. And I think that them widening out those gaps is there to plan for shocks that would be going into the system if something was to go on, like a black swan event or something was to occur.
But July is the start of the fiscal year.
You don't look at that in other countries either. It's just here in Australia. But the reporting seasons occur in September, October, so all the stock markets occur in those months. So I'm not trying to allude that there could be a stock market crash, but I think that there could possibly be some volatility in the financial markets. And if we go back to March of 2023, what occurred is due to the increasing borrowing costs of capital around the world, for some reason this camera is going all blurry.
That's what I told you.
I know, I was joking. I was saying it was your eyesight, right? Something is getting adjusting, hazy in that. So in March 2023, due to copious amounts of rate increase, if you notice that in June 2019 is when monetary policy took a reverse and went backwards. People were very taken back and shocked by that. In May 2019, that was. In May 2022 is when they started increasing interest rates. And over that course of the last 12 months, what happened is if you're a bank and you're borrowing money into bonds, everything's based on the bond market and the bond yields that are being paid. So if money's floating in or out of certain bonds, they go up, and that's why an inverted yield curve signifies a recession, because the liquidity is flowing out of longer term bonds into shorter term, and it becomes a liquidity issue. What happened in March of 2023 is because of 10 months of consecutive rate hikes every month around the world, certain banks were insolvent. Yeah, so the banks went bankrupt. They didn't have enough capital and they couldn't remain open. So that's why the banks went bankrupt last year in March. So a year has passed since that. And it was the 11th of March that it happened. They got a 12-month bond that was created, and they've abruptly ended that, right? So the money that was printed and given to the banks, they got bailed out. Trillions of dollars worth of debts were paid out. So there was money getting printed and put in the system at a much higher rate, I must add. That expired last week on Friday. Yeah. So the impact, does that mean the wheel's going to fall off the cart immediately? No, but they can't take that liquidity back out of the system again. So what's going to happen? So I believe in 2024 we're going to see a lot of instability, and we'll see measures that need to be sticky taped to keep the wheels back on the car of the financial market. So we've had one rate decision, which was in February, and they held it, which, surprise, surprise. If we go, and you were talking beforehand about like job unemployments and stuff like that, we're seeing constantly that the economy is slowing down and whatnot.
Yeah.
If we go to the US and look at their debt, the US debt, if you remember when Donald Trump came into power, right? And he goes, oh, I'm going to make everything great again, whatever he was saying, right? And he said that Obama had all this debt and he had like $18 trillion worth of debt, right? And he said, I'm going to pay it all out. Trust me, I'm going to be the president, right? And then after he left, he had about $28 trillion worth of debt. So it went up by 50% in his term, right? I could be off with the numbers, right? But they can't pay that debt back as a nation, right? And then since he's been out, you've got the other guy in, it's gone up to 32 trillion, 33 trillion, right? And I said something very crucial would happen that's very different to what we've seen beforehand. I actually said this in 2017 or 2018, and you can follow it up on Raw and Uncut, which is in YouTube. It's a series that I had where I was talking about predictions that would happen. I forget where I was going with that. What did I say 2 seconds ago? I've got a mind blank.
You're talking about watching the YouTube and
No, I know what I said. What I was going to say. So in the GFC back in 2008, 2009, we saw some banks go bust, we saw some companies go bust, and certain things that happened. In this time, we're going to see the countries go bankrupt, currencies go bankrupt, and a whole different financial system, which is, happening at the moment. So if we look at the USDebtClock.org, I don't have a slide for it or anything here. Over in the US, debt levels went up 100 days ago to 33 trillion, and now they've gone up to 34 trillion, right? So if we just take the simple part of it, the debt in the US has gone up by $1 trillion in 100 days, right? So 3 months, the debt went up. So if you go back to when the war went on in like Iraq and that, I think it was like a $2 trillion, $5 trillion, it was a very small amount of debt, right? $8 trillion, we're talking trillions. So, but the level that the debt is increasing now, because they've got this level of debt, let's say that they were paying 1% interest on $30 trillion. 1% on 30 trillion would be 300 billion, yeah? 300 billion. So if it was 1% of 30 trillion, 300 billion. But it's not that anymore. It's like 5%. So 5% of 30 trillion is 1.5 billion. So the interest bill on that debt has gone up 5 times, right? And now we're seeing the compounding effect that this is flowing through the economy, and people are losing the trust, the confidence and respect for the currency. So in that point, we're getting a lot of pressure on inflation, which is amazing, but we're going to start seeing countries collapse. We're going to start seeing currencies collapse. Every time we've been in a hyperinflation, look throughout history, before the country goes into hyperinflation, there begins to be hot wars. There's a string of events that occur before a hyperinflation. Google, I think I put in a Birch feed recently, some bullet points about that. But there's very specific things that occur. Governments and their taxation system goes bust. So the taxation goes broke and they go and chase people aggressively for money. We're seeing these things occurring. People can't get access to food, housing. They put rent controls. It's actually happened in 1920s. They put rent controls so you can't put your rent up too high. They're talking about that because people are coming broke. There was an article on news.com today where they said the middle class is getting wiped out. So there's no such thing as a middle class in the future. We'll just have poor and rich. And you know which side of the equation you want to be on when it comes to that, because you don't want to be caught up in Hunger Games. So yeah, my view on the interest rates in 2024, I'm very optimistic. And yeah, we're going to get into the markets later, but if we look at the property markets, they're very look at your local neighbourhood, wherever you're based in the country. Look at your local neighbourhood and tell me that your interest rates have gone up massively, right? And the property prices are still rising. But why is that? Because people have an understanding of debt. They're okay with debt. They're not happy with it, but they're okay with it. They want to get ahead, and they don't really care about money anymore. So the money's losing its value, and inflation's going through the system. So, any thoughts, Rose?
Well, going back to the interest rate announcement for 2024, that was in February. So it was a good news because obviously it hasn't changed. The last increase was in November. But what I see at the moment is that I'm looking at during the month of December, probably there wasn't much movement in terms of purchases. And then comes January, I don't know, it bounced back in February. I think what it is more of the buyer's observation. I think it's more on their observation as to how the trend is going interest-wise. So I feel like there is now more confidence with the buyers, because I see it in our own brokerage. There's a lot of purchases. So maybe the confidence is back, knowing that the last increase was November, and as I said, February hasn't changed. So
from the properties that we're buying and the values that we're refinancing for, we buy things below market value, but things that I was buying in October last year, doesn't matter if it's in Perth, Far North Queensland, Brisbane, somewhere like that, those properties have gone up. Like for us to buy that same property, 50 grand, right? Like say, the markets we're very familiar in, they're going up like 50 grand in a period of 3 months. 50 grand on a 200 grand purchase, like a 20% growth. If we're in a recession, if we're in high interest rate territory, why is that still occurring? What's the trend? Where are we going? People don't want to sell their property for money.
So if I ask you, say for example, for this year, 2024, we are probably talking about interest rate may go down somewhere towards the end of this quarter, October, December. Now, at the moment, the vendor or the seller, or the vendor and the buyer, the property at the moment, because the interest rate hasn't gone down, so is it really a better time to buy? Because once the interest goes down, the prices may go up. Well, would it be a logic that these investors might be putting in?
I've always seen that people are like, I'm going to wait and see what happens, right? I'm going to see what happens. Interest rates, when they come down, I'm going to start buying. But one thing that I've realised of recent times is that people are more clued on, and especially our community that understand macroeconomics and more deeper into things like that. Looking at from a perspective of reality, what happens, we just need to go back into what happened last time interest rates fell down, what happened the previous time that interest rates went down, what occurred. Let's just use Sydney as an example, right? Sydney in 2003, everything went into a recession in 2003, and properties that were selling for say 300 grand were selling in 2008 for 200 grand, right? Every second house in Western Sydney had a piece of paper on it. It was a bank repo, mortgagee repossession sign on the front of it. And then the GFC hit, big recession, and they dropped interest rates from 725 basis points down to 300 basis points at the RBA. And then the interest rates dropped so much, and then everyone just came out and said, we have a big boom from something was 300 in 2003, down 2008 before the GFC hit a level, and then the GFC hit, they dropped rates and certain things happened, and then the property prices went up, and they caught back up in about 2011, and then 2011 they dropped interest rates again. They tried to control it like they're doing now, and then the interest rates came crashing down for a decade, and then the property market took off, and we had the boom in Sydney until they tried to control it with using other measures like APRA and other regulatory controls rather than interest rate controls, because if they pushed the interest rate up, everything would have died back then. Then we saw the interest rates drop even further down to 0% in 2019 before the lethal injection and the illnesses that were out there. And we saw them drop interest rates to 0%, basically. They said it was Corona, you know, all those things. But we were at we should have, like, for what happened in the world, we should have been in the most severe depression you've ever seen in the world, but we weren't. And I called it in February 2020 that we would see the mother of all booms, whilst everyone was locked in their house and scared, because they did one simple thing, and they just manipulated the market, and they printed so much currency. And every time that they drop interest rates and manipulation of the currency, we're now sitting at a point where they're increasing interest rates, and this doesn't normally happen. They're increasing interest rates, and people are like, shit, I'll just keep buying, right? The market is very, you know, people don't want to sell their assets because inflation costs too much, moving costs are too much. People aren't selling, so there's a lack of stock. Someone just said immigration is a massive influence in the property market. 100% it is. 650,000 people came to the country last year. In some reports, it's up to 1 million people who arrived in the country last year. Got more taxpayers, which is great, but where do we put them? And it puts a pressure on the current infrastructure. If we go back to 2008, 2009, we had the same sort of situation occur where migration went up and certain aspects played out. So if we were to see interest rates go down, what's going to happen? What's happened in the past? I can say what's going to happen, but what's happened in the past? I think that's a very true understanding of where we're at now. So I'm going to try and get this camera work. For some reason, we need to get, this is a new camera, this is a cool camera, but we need to get a new one. So yeah. Any other comments?
No, that's it. Look, 2024, I think I'm looking forward to the second half.
Yeah. All the fundamentals, all the things that should be there, everything's been manipulated. I said rates would come down last year, and I said the system would implode. But the banks went bankrupt. They printed all that money in March. So technically, they did bail out the system, but they didn't bail it out with rate cuts. They bailed it out with buying up, you know, injecting liquidity into those certain corporations and institutions. So, question that is on the mind of a lot of people. Some people, if you go to a barbecue this weekend, they might be saying, oh, interest rates, they'll probably go up. They could go to 20% like in the 80s and 90s, right? You know, you could be sitting there educated and be like, look, interest rates are way over where they can be, and it's causing a massive financial concern, and interest rates are tipped to come down very, very shortly. When will they come down? That's the million-dollar question, right? But
okay, what's your take?
They're taking all the liquidity back out of the system. Something's going to break very, very shortly. You can see the volatility out there. You can see the banking issue that's occurring. You can see gold at an all-time high. Bitcoin got to 110 grand, right? So we look at all these things that are occurring, and it's like saying the piece of meat won't cook in the boiling water, right? Why won't it cook in there? Oh, I don't think it's going to cook in there. You can see the fucking bubbles, the froth coming off the top of the pan, right? You throw it in there, it's going to cook. We're in a system which is bubbling away and doing its thing. The warning signs are there. All the warning signs are there. It's just a matter of when is it going to be, when are we going to cook it up, right? When's it going to take off? So in my view, we're going to get the rate cut. 100% we're going to get that. When is it going to happen? I'm not going to say a specific date. I'm not going to speculate that, because I speculated. People are like, oh, Birch, you're wrong. You said this, you said this, and the next thing. But, you know,
I think maybe the last quarter of this year, probably around October.
I would predict one of those sort of periods where they don't meet up, that there's going to be an emergency, and they're going to have to try and put some funding program, right? Think of the word funding program. It may not come as an interest rate. It could come as a short-term funding program, as you know, a different type of. There's a thing called an SDR, right? My view on once the whole system collapses is that there's a thing called an SDR. So the IMF will come out and bail out all the central banks using a special drawing right to a bucket of currency. I spoke about this in 2017 as well. And now they're calling it BRICS. They're calling it these other currencies that they're trying to put value behind and start a new currency.
So if I ask you a question, so for this year, for example, if there is no increases, there is no decreases in the interest rates, with the investors, what advice do you give them?
What would be my advice? Buy properties which are neutral cash flow would be my first one, right? So buying yourself a debt that's going to be burdening you. I was talking to a new investor yesterday, actually, lovely couple, and we were talking about, they said, oh, I didn't know about you, like their mother's a client of ours, and they were looking to buy an investment property for like 700, 800 grand in Melbourne. It's going to be negative $400 a week. And like, it just doesn't add up. And I was like, always think about if the interest rates were to go up, if they're negative $300-400 already, what's going to happen then, right?
Yeah.
If you've got a neutral cash flow property and it's 200 grand, is your interest rate going up 5%? Is it really going to affect you? Yeah, it might cost you an extra $200 a week at that point. But if it's renting for $400 a week and goes to $500 a week, your tenant's paying for that inflation that's occurring there. When interest rates go down, it's going to be the reverse pattern. So,
are you then advising these investors like, okay, well, the interest is steady and the price are not going up yet? Would they be ready to buy now? In the event that if the interest goes down, they're already in the market.
So let's go back to 2020, right? I saw earlier, like about a half hour ago, I was walking, I looked at I had a notification, I had a notification on Facebook. I don't use that one, but I clicked on it, and then someone had made a post, and it was like 4 years from this date. And one of my mates had posted that 4 years ago, all these people were fighting over toilet paper, right? You saw what happened in the shops with the toilet paper, right? You had a supply and demand issue. Right? It was stupid, right? It was hype. It was a manufactured hype, right? Like, if there was a fucking apocalypse, I wouldn't get toilet paper, right? I'd probably go and get food, water supplies, bullets, all those sorts of things, right? But anyway, everyone panicked over toilet paper. So that was a classic supply and demand issue, right? And we've had the last few years where we've artificially created supply and demand issues. Builders going broke because they've been printed so much money, it's injected into these things. Everyone's getting rich, but it's really a fake economy, right? But I mean, that isn't a building economy, that is. The whole economy is fake. But if they were to drop interest rates, how many people, we've got 130 people here, 125 people now watching. If 125 people are here watching us tonight going, how am I going to retire in 2024? How am I going to build wealth in 2024? You'd be thinking, if everyone watching this today could get a loan, would they be out buying a property? Stephen said beforehand on here, can you build portfolios like Birch did today, or is that a thing of the past? There's always been the adversity. I'm going to make a separate video on that, Steve. I'm going to make a separate video on that because Rose has seen single-handedly for 20 years the adversity, right? You've seen that look that she just gave me, right? The pain in my eyes that's got me to where I am. It didn't come there easy, and
it's not only you that I've helped, okay?
Yeah,
I have
thousands of people.
Yes,
but every level there's been a gatekeeper that say you can't get through that. It's like, how do you overcome that? What do you need to do? I was talking to a lady, a client of ours. She's like 30, and she's like 40 properties in the last 2 or 3 years. There's elements that are against us. There's elements that, sometimes there's a green light and it's like, okay, do 5 more steps across the chessboard. There's people that could do stuff and don't do things. Everyone wishes, I wish I bought a property 5 years ago. I wish I did this 10 years ago. I wish I did this, right? But what are you going to be saying in the next 5 years or 10 years? Yeah. So if we were to look at the market in 2 years from now, 12 months from now, 6 months from now, if we dropped interest rates in 6 months, let's say October they dropped, right? Just to use that as and let's say they drop 2%, right? Just for the fun of it. I'm just making it up, right? It's not going to drop 1 month or 2%. It might drop 0.5%, might drop 1%.
0.25.
Yeah, but it'll fall fast. It will be 1% as it drop when they drop. But what will happen? What will cause the market to drop? It won't just be like, oh, okay, everything's great. The housing prices are doubling, and petrol prices are doubled. We're going to drop interest rates now, right? It's going to be news that a major institution's blown up, right? It's going to mean a massive financial catastrophe has occurred, right? So when that news comes out that rates have dropped, people aren't just going to jump out and buy property, right? In 2020, February 2020, I loved that market, right? Because I had all these people, it was like they just dropped, everyone wanted to swap it for cash, right? Maybe they thought they could wipe their ass with it, right? Everyone wanted cash, and all these vendors were like, oh, I'll sell my property today, you go, give me the contract. I stole shit, like, I called the cops, right? I stole things in 2020 and got prices that I should never have got because people were stupid, right? They caused out a panic. So in that glitch, if someone goes, oh, hang on a second, I used an analogy beforehand, like in 2020. I said, if there was a fire in the building, right, everyone's running out of that building. People, let's say there's 100 people in the building, right? 90 of them would be running to the door, 80 of them would be running to the door, get me out of here, get me out of here, right? 8 of them will be sitting there crying, oh, what's happening to me, doing nothing, right? They're getting gobbled by the flames, right? Gone, wiped out, right? If you stayed that room, right, you'd realize that 80% of the people running to the door are going to get slaughtered, get burned, can't get out the door. If you were smart, you'd be like, hang on a second, there's a fire stair over there. I can't get out because it's blocked. But if I go and hide in there, it's got a 4-hour burn time. The fireman's going to come, wash out the whole place, and people that get out and survive good. But whilst everyone's running and panicking, everyone's left their wallets, rings, watches, handbags, phones, all in the room that you're in, right? You could pick up all those wallets, rings, and handbags, take them and go and hide in the fire stairwell. You know you're going to be protected because it's got a burn time frame, and you know the fire brigade's going to come hose it down. So the flight of safety, if interest rates were to drop, people would be running to the door because they're scared of whatever's happening from the drop. That is the last opportunity. That is the last opportunity there of how to get to the escape at that point. Because when everyone comes back, everyone's going to be like, hey, where's my wallet, where's my watch? You come out from the darkness and say, here you go, you want to buy it, right? That is the last time. So if there's people that want to buy today and they can't, what's going to happen when the interest rates go down? They can service more. So you're going to have a supply.
But the price may go up.
It won't go up because it'll just be staying, right? But as more people can service because the interest rate's gone down, more people can service, then there's going to be more demand coming into the market and the supply can't catch up to it. So if interest rates were to drop, I think the immediate would be like, oh, I'm scared about what's happening, right? There'd be a lot of division. But smart people would be out there. Luke just said here, Birch was a burglar. He cleaned up for investors. And he also said, I saw this a couple of moments ago. Keep the questions and comments coming through, folks. We'll get to them later. My rents have increased higher than my interest rate increases. Oh, the beauty, Birchie, right? So people,
nice.
If you've bought well, you've bought below rebuild cost. You've understood what happens with inflation. You've understood the parameters of that market, the room that you're standing in. The interest rates going up, yeah, that goes up, but you can push your rents up. So, you know, we're in an environment as interest rates drop. If you ask my view on it, it's happened throughout history. Just go back and think about all the other times these things have happened. We will see people get scared, so there'll be a bit of inconsistency. And then we'll see the servicing of people. And that's where people need to calculate and be smart about how high the price can go. I know how high a price for property can go in an area before the property price gets there. And here's probably the biggest tip. I've never actually said this beforehand. You, as the property prices or the ability for the property prices to go up, what happens? The people have to service for it, right? And we saw in 2000, if you think about, people say, for those of you that are watching from Sydney, for example, in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, house prices in 2009, when interest rates were 725 basis points at the RBA, 2009, the house price was say 350 grand for a house, right? And someone was on 60 grand income, right? They could service that because they couldn't go any higher. But as the interest rates went down to 4%, then people could afford to spend 700,000 for the servicing because the debt and the expenditure's there. So when the interest rates get manipulated, we can see the servicing increase People don't come in and say, oh, how much? When people come ask for a loan, they're like, how much can I borrow for? Oh, you can borrow 800. Cool. We'll give you a loan for 800. They go, cool. I'm going to go buy a property for 900 now. Right? People always naturally do that. They don't come in lower. So that's what's going to cause the next boom cycle as they drop rates, in my view. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
That's good.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No.
Right. Keep the questions rolling through, everyone. Morgan said here, Nathan learned some lessons from hanging around. Sure, you stole those properties. I did. I did got some bargains out there. There is another topic, right? This is all over to you. Interest rates going up. I'll ask you the question. Interest rates going up and interest rates going down. How does that affect one's borrowing power?
It does affect, because normally the way the bank work it out, it's your capacity to service is based on the actual interest rate. So if the interest rate is going up, so that means your current interest rate would go up as well, right?
Yeah.
And then plus the 3% buffer that they can put in. So it will impact. So if the interest goes down, so obviously you get more borrowing capacity.
Yeah.
So and also it affects also the current loans that you currently have. We need to factor that as well. So the interest rates going up and going down has a lot of bearing in terms of your capacity to service the loan. So for the capacity to service the loan, I think there are a lot of things that could obviously the income, the expenses, your commitments, that sort of stuff, right? Now the way we do it, for professional investors, we do a lot of predominantly we do a lot of investors, right?
Mm-hmm.
For investors, there will be a time that your servicing with the main lenders may not be evident anymore. So what we do now is that you can ask yourself, am I going to stop being an investor because the four lenders or the big banks can't lend me the money? And I would say no, because there are second-tier lenders that are even better than the main banks. These second-tier lenders are very investor friendly. Their servicing calculator are more generous. Let's look at one of the lenders, for example. You know, when you're an investor, you buy a property, obviously it could be a negative, there will be a negative gearing, right? Now, the way most of the lenders, when they do negative gearing, they use the actual repayments of this loan to use for negative gearing. Whereas this particular lender, the benchmark, if say for example, the assessed year loan, you have a current interest rate for 6% to be realistic, and the buffer is 3%. So that's 9% when they assess your loan, right? Based on the 9%. So when you do the negative gearing effect, they'll use the 9% for negative gearing calculation. Whereas some lenders, the main bank, they will use the actual interest rate, which is 6%. So there's a 3% there that that can help you push to servicing. And look, I think it's sometimes it can get you another 300,000 in servicing. So that's for the second-tier lenders. And also when you do servicing, your current rental income, some lender would shade it to 90%, some will shade it to 80%. Some lenders would take into consideration the expenses of your investment. Some would not take that into consideration. So there are a lot out there that if a broker knows what to do, have seen all these different deals, different scenarios, they will be able to help you. We can't help everyone. However, if there is even a slight chance that we will be able to help you, we work hard to make that happen for you. We don't give up easily. We workshop with a lot of lenders. So the possibility of can you replicate Nathan? Can you duplicate Nathan's when he first started? It might be not as robust as 18 years ago, something 23 years ago, but still we were able to do that for you. We have like people has 30 properties, 40 properties. I mean, that's just a span of 3 years or 2 years, yeah?
We spoke about this recently, and I'll be open about it and talk about it on videos actually separately this later. But I haven't borrowed anything from a bank, like a big four bank, for 10 years, at least 10 years, right? I haven't borrowed from a big four bank. And I've been using some lenders, I've had to borrow money at 15%.
Yeah.
Most people are, oh, if I can do 15%, oh, cry, right? I'm happy with it because I commercially see that the deal can happen,
Yeah,
right?
but
And
sometimes the second tier lender, when your finance change, you earn more, and you can always bring you back to the main lender.
I just saw a main lender text you just said, Rose, and you know who it is, right? Someone we both know, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's like being able to, go back to those lenders as well. Like it's not forever, right? Like for
It's
me,
not forever. It's
yeah,
not forever. We've seen it all. Like for example, like hey, if I change job
hmm
and then I basically kids are growing, no more dependents,
hmm
so that could increase your capacity to service the
hmm
loan. I think it's just a matter of time that we can bring you back to the main lender if that is what you wish for.
yeah. I've got a question here. It comes from Lou. Keep the questions come through. There's so many now. I'm just going to.
I know which one is first. We
No,
can
I'll
address.
read this for you, Rose. Hi, Rose. There is some stigma about second-tier lenders charging low introductory rates, then bumping them up much higher, and also causing issues when refinancing. Is this just a narrative pushed by mainstream vanilla brokers who only work with the big four banks?
No, that is not correct, right? The second tier lender, if I, for example, First Mac, for example, this First Mac, the Resimac, this, the pretty good second tier lender, right?
Yeah.
They're not, they're very good. The rate, for example, 6.64, even better than the main lender. The only thing that you have a problem with the second tier lenders is the upfront cost, the valuation cost that you have to pay for. That's all it is, the valuation fee. Now, I mean, that's only like 300 to 500, but I guess the interest rate is comparable to the main banks, and you're able to borrow. I guess you can borrow more, and put it this way, with those lenders as well, they do value your property when you purchase a property. I mean, I don't know, Nathan, but I always thought that if these lenders would do full valuation, at least there's a second eye for you to see what property you're buying because they're doing full val. Whereas with the main lenders, sometimes if you borrow 80%, they'll use the contract of sale.
Yeah.
So there is also an advantage to have your property fully
There's
valued.
pros and cons, but
Yeah.
as you work your way around the monopoly board, literally we've got a big monopoly board here on the wall in the out there doorway. You need to work out, you could be sitting here saying, well, I'm waiting for a big four bank, waiting for a big four bank. If they ain't going to lend to you, you ain't going to do shit. So the only option is to go the next one. I would have used every type of lender out there. Like some of the lenders that I've dealt with, I've had call favors beforehand. I've had people that would have gold chains, right? And a sports car that's 20 years old, and you think, shit, they look like they're at a pawn shop. I've never met what they look like, but they behave like that, right? Like there's all different levels of lenders. I've gone all the way to the end of it, like 8 years ago when APRA came in, right? And I had to go to some of them, and it's like, okay, and then I got out of there, and it's, there is different lenders, but the first tier, the second tier, people get scared by the second tier. Once you're in with the second tier, you can show your borrowing history. You can always refinance when interest rates drop. So I guess going back to the last question, if interest rates were to drop, what would you do? Would you buy or not? People think, well, and the impact of the borrowing. If you can't go to the big four bank today, you could buy a property using a second tier lender, and then as interest rates drop, you'll service for the big four banks, but you'll be avoiding all the pandemonium, around people getting toilet paper from the shops. When people are jumping into the property market gets hot, very hot. And all the first home buyers come out, all the news items come out, it's buy, whatever. You're going to own the property, but you're going to be able to service with the big four bank because as interest rates drop, what happens then?
Well, there's always this. I don't know. They think like main banks are the lowest in interest rate, right? That's not the case all the time. It's not the case all the time. The only reason that they have the advantage is they have the branch presence, obviously.
Yeah.
The valuation is free and all that sort of stuff. But there are people that they're able to service both the second tier and the main lender. Sometimes I put them in the second tier lender because I have a comparison with the main bank and the second tier lender, there was like 0.15% difference.
Yeah.
So why would I put them to the main lender? The good thing about coming from the second tier lender is in the event that you're refinancing them, should I say this? In the event that we are refinancing from the second tier lender to the main lender, most of these main banks, they do desktop valuation. Desktop valuation is a lot higher than the full
They can
full
be,
value.
yeah.
It can be, unless you've renovated the place and everything, right?
Yeah.
I did have one that the desktop valuation is lower than the full valuation. There will be a time that the full val is higher than but predominantly the desktop valuation is always higher than the full val. So if you come from the second tier lender, if in the event that we're going to refinance you to the second tier lender, we might be able to harvest equity. Now, I'm not going to go through that in more detail because I don't think it's proper for me. Yeah.
So I just wrote 2 names here, right? You see these names, you know these people? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was in a meeting in their office recently, and they're talking about funding and that. So, you know, what's going to happen if you want to go here to here, whatever? You have to lift up your skirt a little bit and show what's up your leg, right? And I was like, that's a pretty interesting analogy, right? You don't know, I've never lifted my skirt for you, right? But looking at, the banks, you might have to go to if you go to a big four bank, you might have to lift your skirt up, and it may not be attractive, right? So then it may not be the best thing to do. But just being, here you go to the second tier lender, they're more accommodating in that.
Yeah,
so
accommodating.
A couple of other questions, and we'll move on to the next slide. Is Sam said, what is your view on the low doc loans with limited financial records, which is basically what we just answered. They can be fantastic. Andrew said here, do any of the Zinger preferred lenders offer a portfolio loan? Is this a viable option? I'm going to jump into that. I've got a portfolio loan, and that's how I met Rose, right?
Yeah,
I went to St. George Bank. Yeah. St. George told me, and I was able to service, I thought that was the end of the game, right? I was at a few properties, and the person at the bank said, no, you can't borrow anymore. And I met Rose through her son, who was chatting me on the forum, just a random...
For the young investors.
A bulletin forum back in the day, right? Like ICQ type thing, some of those things still.
But I have a few clients there as well, like the young ones.
And I was like, just text him, the fucking bank won't let me buy anymore. It's like, my mum's a mortgage broker. She's great, right? I was like, oh, whatever, just hook me up with your mum, right? And then when I spoke to Rose, she's like, yeah, you can service, but it was the policy that was at the bank that was wrong. And I think you took me to CBA at the time, right? And my loans, what this lady had done at CBA, at St. George, is that she called it a portfolio loan. So I got my first property. And I was like, okay, I want to buy a second one. I've saved up a deposit. And she goes, I'm going to make it nice for you and make it all clean for tax and whatever. And we're going to call it a portfolio loan and all this. So I bought this property, and then I didn't realize that she'd made a portfolio and she'd cross-collateralized that debt. And then I was like, let's buy another one. And I buy another one. And then I'm like, I want to buy another one. And she's like, and I didn't know what equity was at the start. I had no idea what equity was 21 years ago. And she goes, you can use equity. I was like, great. So I did that. And then I wanted to buy more. And she goes, no, you don't service. And I'm like, I just got a second job. I'm working 2 jobs, blah, blah, blah. This was like back in the day. And I couldn't do shit. I'm like, well, you're fucked. I'm like, I'm going to take a property away from you. And I realized I couldn't do anything because the property were all cross-collateralized.
This is in Tregear, is one of them?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah.
And the one in Penrith.
Yeah, a couple in Penrith.
There's only 2 properties that you have before I met you.
No, I think there was more.
No, you only have 2.
I think there was more. She crossed them all up. No, there was more. There was more. There was more. I think there was 4. There was 4. Penrith, Heversham.
Yeah, Heversham. Yeah.
All of them. So looking at it on that front, those properties were all, there was like 4 of them at the time, all crossed.
In a portfolio, yeah.
In a portfolio loan. And that portfolio loan was the most worst thing that I've seen people do, and they're so bad. Andrew also asked another question. Does Zinger have an office or staff in Queensland? We don't have an office in Queensland. I actually have multiple offices in Queensland, but we don't have any Zinger staff placed in that office. people don't normally meet face to face. Maybe Rose, you can explain how we offer and what we do and the world that we live in today.
So it's not necessarily, we don't have to have face to face, right? And we can have a maybe Zoom or a Teams meeting if you wish, but normally we do conference call. And then to identify you, we normally send you to the branch. If you're with, say, for example, Commonwealth Bank, you can visit the branch and get your ID. There's also a software called IDU, and that is very well recognized by National Australia Bank, and there's a lot of lenders to use it. So when you do IDU, this is just to identify your passport, driver's license. You send it to them, and then once they've identified it, they must have some, I don't know, way of checking if the legitimacy of those documents. And then once it's ready, they will notify me and said, your client has provided the documents, you can now video call. So then I video call you. Once I video call you, there will be a video call yourself and myself in one screen, and then we send it back to the lender. That's how we identify people. But in terms of explaining your application or the process, that can be done over the phone. We're very detailed in terms of like the fact find, and then when we have all the fact find, we then look at like you to send us documents. Once we receive those documents, I call you again and look at like, hey, we have reviewed these documents. This is how the process. This is where I would recommend that maybe we can use this lender based on deposit you have and based on your servicing. Now, obviously, we provide you with a compliance, and the compliance basically disclosing everything from three types. We recommend three products, and the loan features, the product features, the interest rate, and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes it's the service level. Maybe sometimes we consider the service level as well when we're choosing the products we recommend you. So all these things can be done over the phone and electronically as well. Now, to gather the fact find, we also send you a link to our client portal. There you can put all your details. Some of them that you may not be able to answer, did I go back and talk to you and go through all those questions. And also very important for me to review your expenses. We're very, very careful, make sure that you have declared expenses. You also have declared the liabilities that you have. We cannot afford to have understating the expenses or undeclared liabilities. So we're very, very thorough. It's quite a long process, but again, as brokers, we know what to find, we know how to ask these questions, and as I said, like things can be done. Identifying you there is a software that the bank uses, and that basically face to face is good. However, if you're remote, then the best option, I guess, is if you want face to face is Zoom or Teams, for example. But telephone calls suffice as well.
I'm going to take a little photo here. Andrew asked for someone to contact him tomorrow. I'm going to forward it to you, Rose, and someone from your team. I'll send you the text now.
Yeah.
To have a chat and take it offline and see what you guys can do.
Mm-hmm.
Josh just asked, put a question in there as well for you, so don't read it out. He asked you just a private question here, so if you can read that. But Josh asked, what do you think of commercial super fund loans and commercial loans in general? I'll answer that just a moment, like very briefly for commercial, and I'll hand it over to Rose. When you buy a property that's residential, you put down a 5% deposit, 10% deposit, 20% deposit. When it comes to commercial, you put down 25%, 30%, 40%, 50%. The reason why the bank requires a large deposit is because the bank deems the security is more risk. So they're adding that risk in the deal, so you could put double the amount down. If you had $1 million, let's say you've got, just say we've got 400 grand, right? With 400 grand, you could buy $2 million worth of property as a 20% deposit on a residential property, or you'd be able to buy $1 million worth of property as a commercial property. So as a first, right, you can buy double the amount of property because of the loan structure. And secondly, in that property to go up as a commercial property, the valuations are based on a rental return. If you've got a fixed lease for 3 years by 3 years by 3 years or 5 years, well, the property can't go up apart from the 3 or 4% that you've baked into the CPI, and sometimes the rents vary out. and the commercial property might be vacant for 10 years at a time. I own some commercial properties and I think they're great, but I wouldn't have bought them in the early days. Like my first commercial property was a Video Easy that's been sitting vacant for 11 years. I had it vacant for 2 years and I rented it out to an ASX listed company, everyone. It's used as a server. I don't ever disclose what the company is, but it's used as a big infrastructure server, and it's used for telecommunications, right? And that telecommunications company has rented it for 20 years, and it was only because my portfolio could hold it for those few years. I was just lucky that I had that happen. But the lending is different, the asset type is different, and yeah, it does change things. Over to you, Rose, your thoughts.
Well, I think, are you asking, okay, I think this is particularly for self-managed super fund, either commercial or residential, right?
Yeah.
So I think he sent me a text message. So self-managed super fund can be commercial and residential. Now, with the commercial lending, obviously it depends on the security. So the loan valuation ratio depends on, say, for example, if it's a specialized security, they could probably lend you up to 65% LVR. So you have to produce 35% deposit plus cost. Now, if it is a commercial like office or shopfront in a metro area, they could probably lend you to 80%. Some lenders would do, but 75% is safe to say. Now, with the commercial lending, look, it's the same process, commercial and under SMSF or under a company. Now, with that, regardless of who the borrower is, it's still the LVR will apply the same. Now, with the residential self-managed super fund, obviously it's very, very simple, same as residential under your individual names. They can lend up to 80%. I have not done, with self-managed super fund, I haven't done any less than 20% deposit with self-managed super fund. I've always done 80%. I don't know, I think there's probably some there that are 90, but I haven't really ventured to that. I've always asked, if it is self-managed super fund, I go for 80%. Now, I think when you are self-employed, you be careful with self-employed as well. If you are in self-managed super fund, look, the servicing for self-employed obviously is what you can, as a self-employed, what you contribute towards the self-managed super fund. I think for 2024, they upped the contribution up to 30,000, right? It was cut from 25, then this year 27,500. In the next financial year, in July, it will be 30,000. So you can obviously contribute towards that. If you don't have any contribution towards sometimes self-employed, they're not very vigilant in contributing towards the super fund. Now, if they can see that you are doing the lump sum amount, that's okay as well. Doesn't have to be regularly every quarter. No, I think with self-employed, you need to look at that you are contributing towards for the last 2 years. And if, for example, if you are self-employed, we have one self-employed, she wasn't able to contribute towards the self-managed super fund. However, the other member, which is PayYG, luckily he does salary sacrifice as well as contribution from the employer. That was enough to service the SMSF loan plus the rental income of that investment properties. Now, I've always mentioned to everyone that if you want to be an investor and then servicing or deposit you don't have under your name, there's always that alternative way of investing through your self-managed super fund. And it is really good because the servicing is non-recourse. It is based on the income within the superannuation. Now, look, that it is very, very popular at the moment, the self-managed super fund. And I guess when you are contributory as well, that's even better.
I got here. Can you have a loan for interest only in super fund?
Yes, yeah. We do. Cool. We do. There is the one that we use at the moment. There's one particular lender, good interest rate, but they only cater for PNI. But there are 3 other lenders that can do interest only. We've always have interest only because, say, for example, if you don't have enough balance in your super fund and you want to purchase more, so cash flow wise, then recommends IO, interest-only repayments.
Yeah. Someone said that you can put 27,500 in for 2024.
Yeah.
And
I think you can also make up from if you haven't contributed last
year
up to 3 years. I think it's something like that.
Dylan, sorry I haven't gotten back to you. Let's catch up. I think we've got some calls after this, but let's catch up maybe tomorrow. Just flick me a text. I'll come back to you tomorrow. I'll give you a buzz. Stephen said, if you have a B.Invested client who uses a whole suite of B.Invested companies, who holds the responsibility for building the portfolio strategy? Is it the client or is it B.Invested? From the strategy on that front, that would normally come from me with the client, give you the strategy. But we're limited with finance, and ultimately it comes down to, I know Stephen, situation, right? But for everyone watching this, ultimately, it comes down to you as the investor taking the decision, right? And I know, Steve, you do jump in and go, cool, I'm going to do that. That's what I've been told. That's what I need to do for my next steps. I'll go do that. And you run with that. But we're limited with financials and all different things that are at play. The example that I used before about when the interest rates drop, you're going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that when it occurs. I think I'm going to talk about that as my next slide, actually, about how that will impact and benefit from that. So I'll come back to that, but it is myself predominantly which will give you the strategy and the guidance and all that.
So finance has the last say.
Finance, ultimately, if you can't get the loan, you can't do the deal, right? But yeah. Andrew says here, to use superannuation property, what is the minimum dollars recommended to have in a super to begin? I'm going to answer that very specifically. Maybe we can take it offline, Andrea.
You can say something. Because,
I will. Yeah, I will.
Red already recommended something, some sort of amount, yeah.
I'm going to go into super funds just for a second, right? To be giving advice on a super fund, I can't give advice on that. Maybe Rose, you have to be a financial advisor. We don't give financial advice because we're not a financial advisor. But if I was a financial advisor, you wouldn't be hearing from me talking the way that I talk, because they're very regulated and they have all these communist sort of regulation frameworks that they have to deal with. And generally, a financial advisor will try to sell you insurance and shares and managed funds and all these things that you get commissions on. So just there's my little disclaimer. That I'm not a financial advisor, but financial advisors, I don't have any good ones out there, right? I know a couple of good ones, I've used them, and even then, advice is sort of different than what I would give. So advice I can't give. However, general speaking of a super fund, people would need around 200 grand as an entry point to get into a super fund, which is what they say, ASIC, and all the controlling and regulatory bodies say all that, right? So if you were to go to a financial advisor and get their feedback and their advice, they would say you need $200,000 to get started. However, we're not in the game of setting up super funds and financial planning and all of that sort of stuff. Things that I have seen people do over the years to be able to get going is, I remember when I set my super fund up, I had no one. It was way back in the day, 40 grand. It was 30 grand actually. And the reason why I set it up, I was in my job and I was quitting my job, and I had thrown $5,000 into my super fund. And I looked back at the statement the following quarter, and it's gone backwards. No, it was like it disappeared, it vaporized, right? I was like, I can't control that shit. The money's disappearing out of the super fund quicker than ever. But I set mine up with about 35, and I think if I look back, I bought a property for 40 grand. I had a property to settle, and I was, 23 years old or something. And the way I saw it at 23 years old, my dad died of a heart attack at 62. And I was like, he didn't get to enjoy his super. So I was just like, I'm going to be retired before then. I'm on my path. I'm just going to get it and set one up. So that was that. But the costs that are associated do eat into a super fund. So people don't realise that when you have your money in a normal super, you're paying insurances and fees, and they're taking out all these expenses. I spoke to someone today with almost $500,000 in their super, and they didn't know where their money was. I'm like, someone's got their grubby mitts on your money and it's losing. And I'm calculating their income, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. because the fees gobble up their super. So having money in your super gets gobbled up from fees, right? Because they're just taking fees, and it's not always, you know, if I was to have my time again, I wouldn't be having an industry, and I'd rather have my money where I can control it. So that's my personal viewpoint on it. So you need to work out, is it viable for the fees? You know, they say 200 grand is the entry level. There is regulations around that, but if you're a sophisticated investor and you're investing in the property and you know what you're doing and you're seasoned and you go and get someone to set it up, well then you can do it with whatever you wish, right? But my non-financial advice, I'm not giving financial advice here, is to make sure that you do have sufficient in there. You don't want to be setting it up with 30 grand or 50 grand in a super where you would not be, it'll cost you more in accounting fees and auditing fees and what it would be worthwhile for you to have.
The setup cost as well.
The entry level that I have seen, which like as a third party seeing it as acceptable, going, yeah, I'll do it today. If I was to do it again, would be, you know, I can't give that advice, right? It's not advice, but where I've seen other people do it, and I personally go, oh yeah, that's interesting, would be around that 100 grand level, and I can't give advice on that. So that's the short answer, the long answer too. And another question I was asked here, and this is around super, we're going to get off supers, right? If someone can't service under their personal name, right? Let's say, I don't know, someone's fucked, right? They've got 5 kids, and you know they've got 20 properties, and they've got income that doesn't support their max, right? Can they buy in their super fund, and how does the super fund work different than the ones in your personal life?
I think with the, as I mentioned previously, the superannuation servicing is based on the contribution towards the super and the rental that derives from the investment property. And those are, it's a non-recourse, so the servicing is based on those figures. So often with self-managed super fund, I find that you guys, with the investors, they don't really buy like 800,000 properties, or you know, it's very manageable type of loan. So most likely you'll get it serviced. Now there is also another lender that can also do, for example, like, I don't know, if you're only member of that self-managed super fund, you might have an issue of servicing because it's only your contribution towards it, right? And then the rental income may not be enough to service that loan. However, there's another lender there that if, for example, servicing in a self-managed super fund is not suffice, you can also use your individual, your personal income to get it over the line. I've only done it twice only in that scenario, but there is also a case where if self-managed super fund income is not servicing the loan, then if you still have a capacity to service using your personal income, then we can also do that.
Yeah. Cool. So moving on to the next slide, which is the important one, how to increase your passive income this year and how to create more income. And I think that, you know, some things you don't have to do, some things, but if we go to someone and go, okay, you've got a job and maybe one property, well, then you've got one option, right? That's to work harder, right? If you've just got one job, you've got to work harder to earn more income from that. But if you have one property and one job, well, then you've got a property, you've got your job, you can work harder and do whatever, but you've also got your property, right? What can you do to your property? Push the rents up. We can see interest rates drop down. You can add a renovation to the property, etc. You might have a business, right? You might be thinking of setting up a business. So there's different ways to create second streams of income, third streams of income. Obviously, if you're thinking about cash flow and generating more cash flow, speak to Zinger, speak to Rose, speak to the team about what options there are before you go do it. If you go set up a business, it could throw you 2 or 3 steps behind, yeah? So looking at, you know, if you've got a job and you've got one property, well, could be buying more property, right? You're buying 10 properties, could be buying 5 properties, whatever it is, right? Scale that portfolio to meet your needs of what you need in your life. if we have a situation like we have right at the moment, that is everyone's whinging the rents have gone up, apart from us as greedy landlords, right? We're excited by that. We could be sitting there looking at, the rents and being, okay, the rent used to be $500 a week, now it's $700 a week, it's gone up $200 a week, it's costing me $200 a week extra to live. So that's what most people are faced with. So as an investor, you could be sitting there going, shit, interest rates have gone up, life's bad, whatever, adversity's hit me, whatnot. But at the same time, you'd be like, imagine if I was renting still, right? You're paying extra 10 grand a year. Imagine if I didn't have those 10 properties that I could push the rents up. Yeah, my interest rates have gone up, and Luke touched on this beforehand. His rents have gone up higher than the interest rates have gone up. This is the most important and crucial part of having a portfolio, right? Let's say interest rates dropped 3% tomorrow, right? They came crashing down. They're at 0% beforehand, now they're at 435 basis points. If they were to drop down to 125 basis points, right? Oh, it's impossible for it to happen. Well, it was sitting at that for 5 years beforehand, right? Before the interest rates went up. So let's just assume that it went back to that level and we'll be sitting at 4% interest rate, right? Whatever. If the interest rates dropped by 3% and you had a $3 million loan or debt position, if you had no property, well then it doesn't matter, right? You're not going to be impacted up or down, right? You're not playing in the game. If you have one property, and this has a 200 grand loan, it's gone up by 3% or 4%, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's going to cost you 2%, 200 grand, 4%, that's 8 grand a year. Yeah, it's going to hurt. But if you put your rent up $100 a week, it's only costing you 2 or 3 grand a year at that point. Interest rates come crashing down on that property, you're going to be saving 8 grand a year. Yeah. Now imagine you've got 10 properties, right? Or you've got $3 million of debt. If your position's that you've got the $3 million worth of debt and it's neutral cash flow because interest rates gone up, rents gone up, neutral position. As interest rates start falling and coming down, if they were to drop 3% of $3 million, that would be $90,000 a year that one would be getting. I know that I can see in the comment section here that there's going to be people quitting their job and restructuring the debt, of course, before they quit their job, when rates come crashing down, because you've done the hard yards, you've got the assets, you've got the arc, you've got all the stock that you need in your portfolio to be able to do that. So I think it might be a bit mundane, and some of us are sitting there going, oh, interest rates have gone up, it hasn't tripled in value, it's only got up 100 grand on the 200 grand price, whilst the interest rate's going up, it can be a bit of a drag. But it's like, my investing journey of 21 years is not, I've been investing for more than I've been alive, right? Like more than half of my life, right? And there is like lonely times, poor times, fucking credit cards to keep the lights on times, borrowing off all the people that you know around you times. And there's times where, where you've got awesome times. And I think it's important to know that, that happens in all different phases of your journey. And it's just a part of the thing. It might feel daunting, but it took 12 months or 18 months. It's been 18 months, 2 years since interest rates started to go up, and it's only been the last 12 months that have been, really bubbling in the interest rates department. So if you took the last 12 months interest rates increases off, right, considering that they haven't really done anything for about 12 months anyway, but if you took off the last 18 months worth, like the 12-month section, it would be next to nothing. Like the interest rates are basically getting free money. So having that portfolio, when these things adjust, is going to create a massive cash flow difference in your position. And I think a lot of you guys that are watching this and girls that are watching this will be very beneficial from rate cuts, just that simple exercise of doing that.
But also the right property, increase your passive income,
if you're buying $1 million property, renting for $700 a week,
it's like a 3%, 4% yield, right? Yeah. So I think having the right property, I suppose you're always going to look at like what would be the yield, and compared to the interest rate. I mean, you guys, it's just like it's so easy to calculate. It's very elementary.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if my interest rate is 6%, I get a yield of 10%. So That's positive, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and looking at it, the property is important. The price and the entry point of the property is collecting the assets. Buying more, selling more. I think that someone asked me today about selling a property. Their position was, I was like, okay, yeah, it's like the separation sort of thing. I was like, okay, do that, that's fine. But I spoke to someone yesterday and he's asked me, which property do I sell? And I'm like, they're all fucking great, right? And this guy's got like 20 properties in the last 2 years, right? I'll write the name down so you know who I'm talking about here. It's fun, right?
Yeah.
He wants to sell one, get a bit of cash out, right? Because the servicing can't go to the big four. And he's like, I can't wait till the rates drop. I just want to get some cash in. And I've looked at them and they've all gone up tremendously and they've all done very extremely well. But he kept saying, which one should I sell? I'm like, I was like, I don't, we're gonna look at this in a year or 2 years or 3 years time. We're like, fuck, I wish I didn't sell anything, right? So I'm not going to participate in giving any advice on which one you should or should not sell. But we ran through some strategies of, options, and he asked me the options, and I was like, that could look like that, that could look like that.
You can also negotiate, say, for example, if you are in a principal and interest repayment, then maybe reset that to interest only period.
Idea?
Yeah. That will help the service, the cash flow.
Or shop for a cheap interest rate.
Yeah.
So it's looking at selling. If you want to sell, I don't think anyone's going to be looking back at 2024 and going, oh, I wish I sold 2024 with the interest rates high. Because what's going to happen when interest rates go down? They're at the top of their cycle. Rents, and I guess going on to my next slide, right? I'm going to go on to the next slide, is understanding the inflation that's happening out there in the market, right? Like, what is, inflation look like? How is inflation going to look like moving forward? What is the long-term view of inflation? Is inflation good or bad? Inflation is what makes everything go up. And like, let's say, for instance, if we look at a high level of inflation or a low level of inflation, when inflation becomes very fast and high levels of inflation, it's because you've got a longer term of inflation in a shorter period of time. A hyperinflation would be like 50 years of inflation in a period of 6 months. So the higher the level of inflation, the quicker the velocity of that inflation is occurring is inflating your goods and services away, good or bad. If you've got expenses, then it's bad. If you've got incomes, then it's good. So I guess looking at how inflation works, inflation, they say, is bad, which it is. I think it's going to hurt a lot of people. For me, it's amazing because I look at the debt, I look at the cash flow. I like investing in assets which the cash flow can be inflated away, the value of the asset can be inflated away, but the debt becomes irrelevant with inflation because the more money they print out there, the cheaper that the money is, the more people go and buy it, get the money, and then the less purchasing power it has. So I'm looking at properties. So Rose and I have been talking about refinancing and restructuring and debts and stuff like that. And some of the debts on properties that I've got, I was surprised. There was one yesterday I looked up. It was like I was looking for some loan statements, chatting to Rose, and it was this one here. It was and I had it down at $200,000 for loan value, $230,000, and I looked at it, and it was only 110.
Yeah.
And then there was another one which was this one here, which I had down at 290,000, which was only 220,000, right? And looking at it, these properties that I bought for 100 grand are now 500 grand, or 200 grand and now 700 grand, and I only owe 100 or 200 debt. Like, the debt's become irrelevant. The property didn't get any better. It's still got the same bricks, still got the same light fittings, still got everything in there. But the cost of the labour, the cost of everything has pushed the value of that asset up naturally because inflation is making everything more expensive. So the debt became irrelevant. Back in the old days, I'd go, Rose, I need this property, I need a loan, whatever. And I'd laugh. If I found the 22-year-old version of myself, I'd kick myself in the ass and go, push yourself harder. Like, I'd be like fucking military style to myself because, I was wimpy with certain decisions. And, looking at those properties, they just inflate away, but the debt is still, you were saying the other day, what I used to talk about $10,000 ended up at $100,000, right? Now when I've got an issue, right, and issues come my way constantly, right? Deadlines, pressures, settlement conditions. The issues that I have today aren't 10 grand issue, aren't 100 grand issue. They're millions and tens of millions issues, right? So laughing, right? Because these have happened of recent times, and it's like, oh, it's okay, we'll sort out the $2 million, we'll get it sorted next month. And it's like, the scale has changed. On a good day, the extra zero is good. On a bad day, the extra zero is bad. But
now we're talking millions, not only thousands, right?
And we'll talk about billions one day, right? And there's no second job, there's no Uber driving to fix that, right? Because it's having the assets to be able to do that. And inflation has allowed that to happen in my life. If it wasn't for me taking those decisions 20 years ago, pushing through markets like what we see today, and it's built that position. So when you look at inflation, I touched on it beforehand, interest rates will come down, everyone will be like, oh, a bank just went broke, and bloody major corporation in a Westfield shopping centre just went bust, right? 10 of them went down this week. A super fund went bust. I saw an article about a real estate investment trust. It's down 17% a year. In the last year, a Sydney-based commercial real estate trust, right? The reason why I talk about your super funds and all that sort of stuff in a non-financial advice is that if you're in super funds investing in this shit, then your super fund is going to be losing its money and you're going to be in the negative position. So yeah, all it would take is for a couple of these things to go bust and get wiped out. In 2008, I used to day trade shares. There's the thing of the day. Birch, he doesn't like paper assets. Why does he like paper assets? I used to sit there and be like, my colleagues would be going to work and they're like, I'm like, I made $500 a day, I made $1,000 a day. And I got fucked up. And I was like, let's trade with the T plus 3 days and not have the money in the account. Like, yeah, I just made 20K today, right? I'm like, I'm not fucking going to the office, right? I'm not going to work. I made another 20K, right? And it worked great until you get stuck in a trading hole, right? And then you don't have the ability to pay that back, and you have to lose 20K that day, and you lose 20K a day, and it became lonely, right? So I have traded paper assets. I have invested into all different financial instruments. And I remember taking my 20 grand or something that I had left over, right? I actually had personal loans to get shares, right? And I was like, I need to make back 50 grand that I lost. After all this time, effort, I lost this cash, and I had a property in Tamworth I bought for 105,000. Fortunate enough, the thing burnt down. I got like 250K payout from insurance, and then I sold the land for like 60 grand or something. And then I was like, fuck, I just made all the losses back. And that property I said I would do it with, right? I was like, oh, I'm over those, right? Someone said we're on mute. I don't know. It's showing that you can hear, everyone else can hear me. Can you hear us? Or are we on mute for you? Okay, cool. Everyone's saying that they can hear, so I don't know on that. It was Luke that said that, yeah. Cool. So, yeah, looking at so the things I was day trading, I day traded Central. I was like, real estate investment trust. I didn't know what the fuck I was investing into, right? So I didn't know, right? But I was investing into, there's two parts of Central. One owned the property, one owned the management business. And I think one of the businesses went under, and I think it was the building business that went under, but the management business stayed alive. So you wouldn't have thought that. It doesn't have real asset. It's just a property management business, right? But the property management business stayed alive, but the property business went bust because of the liquidity in the building. So when you start seeing a few things like that that are big enough and they start toppling over, you're sitting there going, shit, this is pretty scary. And that's why interest rates are going to fall. The day that we see them go, oh, we're in a recession, the news is like really bang, 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 we start seeing rate cuts, that is the day we should all go, I don't drink, I haven't drank for years, I don't drink alcohol, but that's the day we should all go to the pub and fucking celebrate and go and get some drinks, right? Because that's when we should be celebrating, because that's when we're about to see the shift to an inflow of money. And that's what we saw in the start of 2020 when they dropped everything in 2019. And it was pre the illness. It happened. It all happened pre the illness. They blamed it on that, right? Just conveniently happened, right? Oh, we had to do this, and that's why it is. Don't ask any questions, right? So it is a lot of. There'll be an event. There'll be an event. I'm confident there'll be an event, and the inflation that will come will cause a hyperinflation. The inflation will not be inflation that's been seen before in this next cycle. So that's my views on the inflation. And I guess going on to the next part is having a mindset. Maybe you want to talk about.
I think having a clear mindset is everything. Now, look, before you even if you're gonna be purchasing a property, you obviously look at what is your financial goal, right? And then you probably look at, should I buy under a trust or should I buy under a company, under my own name? Now, you may have to probably check with your accountant if what's a tax effective for you. But at the end of the day, I think you need to speak to a broker, because if you are going to multiply your investment property, I would say, okay, should I go straight to the trust or should I go just buy under my name to start with? Now, personally, I would like to have my investment properties under my name first, right? Okay, because first of all, there is the negative.
There's no tax or legal advice to anyone. There we go.
Okay, this is just my personal thing, right?
Personal view.
This is my personal opinion, personal view. My first 3 properties, so I would probably put it under my name because of the negative gearing effect. So if you have, for example, you're in a high tax bracket, so that's really beneficial. The tax concession, right? The tax benefits you get out of it. Now, also the same token, like if you have it under the trust, you obviously don't have that tax benefits. Now, if you are in obviously trust is good for distributing the income from the trust. You can nominate who you distribute the income, and also for asset protection. So that's where trust is good. Now, if, for example, you are buying under the trust, I think if it is a positively geared, for example, probably trust is a good one as well, because you can't have a negative gearing effect if you are in a positive. Now, also with the trust, there are also the benefits of putting the property under the trust. One of them, there are lenders there that says, if now I'm borrowing under my name and I have also a loan under the trust, which the banks consider as a company, they may not take the liabilities on the trust. So it free me from the liability in the trust. I will not be responsible the repayments and everything, provided it's a self-liquidating, provided that I have an accountant can say that the taxes, the commitment under the trust is serviceable within the trust. Now, that will also save you from not having that liability. So you can move forward under your company's name. Now, I think it's probably best to have it mixed as well. If you're after, if there is a positive, if it is positively geared, right? Because the distribution of income you can nominate, but personally, sometimes it's detrimental to your servicing, because if you have a trust, if you're borrowing under the trust, if I can have a negative gearing effect on the process of that loan, then I may not be able to service the loan. So remember, trust doesn't have negative gearing effect, but the advantage of the trust is obviously the distribution of income. You can nominate who distribute the income.
Land tax becomes an issue as well in a lot of instances. So if you were to buy New South Wales under your personal name, you won't pay land tax for the first 700, 800 grand. But inside a trust, you'll be paying from day one if you're a spouse, and both of you would be able to get that land tax-free threshold. So looking at from a perspective of buying a trust, then you need to weigh up. It's not just it's for asset protection, because you can still get sued in a trust as well. You need to weigh in all aspects of that as to whether it's the right vehicle.
So the few aspects is basically the most important, the serviceability, right? And secondly, obviously, the cost of setting it as well under the trust. And if you're going to go through the trust, you need to make sure that it is the right trust. You can't have a trust. Obviously, the most common is a family trust, right? Discretionary trust, fixed trust, which is a unit trust. And there's also one that I haven't been encountered it before. I just noticed it, right? It says discretionary trust asset protection or something like benefit. It's more like the bank didn't accept it. No banks accepted it because it is a discretionary trust, but there was an order of benefits. Like if, for example, something happened to this person, the order of benefits is this, and the bank didn't like it. I've never seen it before, and I've never done it, but it was good to know it. And
then bloodline trust too.
Yeah, that's similar to that. So, and the bank didn't accept it, so it was a bit useless to have that because
the bloodline trust.
Yeah,
a bloodline trust is if you're married or something, and then the person's not of blood, and then something.
I think it was like in hierarchy. I think like if I'm gone, the first one to get the bite is this, and then the next one is this, and so it's very well controlled, I guess. And the bank doesn't like it because if in case like they have to repossess properties
of someone else that didn't go.
Yeah. So I think having a clear mindset is basically look at like if you are not sure if you're going to buy under the trust or under your name, speak to the broker first, because first of all, you need to look at if you're going to borrow under the trust, then can it service? And if you borrow under your name, what benefit do you get, right? Is there a negative gearing effect there? Or if it is a positively geared, maybe you have to trust. But there are lenders, only a few lenders that doesn't have to take the trust liability if you borrow next under your name. But then again, you need to have that an accountant letter to say like the trust itself can service whatever income the trust is servicing itself.
Yeah, I think just being educated, having the knowledge, and running scenarios. Like all my strategies I've ever run for any of my property, any of my strategies I share with everyone. I've run different types of projections of them, plan A's, plan C's, plan B's, D's, a plan B for a plan A, a plan C for a plan A, a plan B for a plan B. I want to know from all aspects what are the risks associated with it, what would it look like in this environment, what would it look like in that environment, what would it look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the track. And that's what's given me the ability to pull the trigger and be able to, in some eyes of people, even my family, people think that I act hastily. They think, oh, Birch just did something like that's pretty ballsy. Is that like monopoly money to you, right? And people will say there that there's a different mindset, and the mindset and the confidence comes from having strategies around that. So I think educating yourself, running strategies, being clear on the numbers, knowing the numbers, trusting the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Your emotion does, your ego does. Oh yeah, let's do 50 of these things. Let's do one of these things. Let's not do this, right? There's some sort of emotion, and that's where I think people get killed. So having clarity, having a plan, having a business plan,
And I also want to mention some of you guys like borrowing money with a friend or with a member of family other than your husband or your wife. Sometimes it can be detrimental because you'll be say for example, for example, again, there's only one bank that can separate those liabilities, but you're limited to that, right? But 90% of that, if I have to bring you to another lender, you'll take the whole debts, and also you'll only take 50% of the rental. There is also another lender, you take the whole debts and you'll take the 100% of the rental. Either way, the responsibility of the debt may fall on you, the whole amount. So please remember, if you ever get into having a partner or a borrower that is non-wife or not your wife, or you're not your husband, then you have to think about it, because what would be your future borrowing? Now, that is very, very important. Often it can cause some servicing issue.
I don't have any properties with anyone. I own properties that aren't in my name. It's kind of sound like I've got mules out there, right? I've got people that own properties under their name, which are mine, right? And I'm cool with that. But the thing is that if people were to go halves in properties or anything like that, then that would limit themselves in different instances. So what are you bringing to the table? Are you bringing servicing? Are you bringing capital? What's the other person bringing to the table? So you may not be able to service, but you have a brother or sister that could get servicing, but they don't have a deposit. You can say, hey, I'll put the money in, I'll give you 50K deposit, you go get the loan, you go buy the property, and when we sell it, we split it. Right?
Yeah, it's the decision making as well. We have one at the moment that he really wants to harvest the equity, but the other partner is reluctant because he doesn't need to release any equity because obviously the loan would increase. He's also as much responsible of the loan that you have reapplied. So that could be also a detrimental as well, decision making.
And if you've also got to think about the longevity of this as well, right? So say for instance, so the guy and girl meet, they're 25 years old, they want to go and have kids at 30, right? Get married. So there's different phases whilst you're 25, different phases when you're 27, different phases when you're 30, and different phases when you're 35, just making up examples, right? And let's assume that your boyfriend and girlfriend, you both got income, you both servicing, right? You can go buy your properties individually. You buy them together, then you screw it up. You then go and get engaged and married, right? Then your finances become joined together. Then you go and have kids. Mum stays at home, dad goes to work. You need to think about the asset that you buy when you're 25, about when your missus is going to be your wife in the future, and then you're 35 and you've got kids, and she's not working. Are you going to put the negative gearing under her name? You're going to put the cash flow under her name? If you buy 50-50 at that point, is her servicing going to bring you down? Is your servicing going to bring her down? All those things you need to factor in.
Yeah, I think there's like joint tenants or tenants in common.
Yeah.
It is also important to speak to your solicitor.
But even just loading them up. Yeah.
Well, I have one that's like I did say, like maybe we'll do tenants in common because obviously who benefits more in the negative gearing, maybe we put more into that. But again, I can't really advise you. You may have to speak to your accountant or whoever to get it done. But I can only say that think about it.
So on to the next slide. And do you remember I said beforehand to add a slide in?
Yeah.
I was sitting here and I got the paper printout of the slide, and I looked at it and I was like, there is not this slide in here, right? I said, I want to add in. I said, my slide was, can I build a 10+ property portfolio in 2024? And I was going to talk about how many properties you need to build in a property portfolio in 2024, and can you still do that? So I guess this slide and the next slide I'm going to turn into one, and then we'll get some questions and stuff as well. But how many properties do you need to retire from the workforce? And I always talk about that you need to reverse engineer. So find out what the goal is that you're trying to hit. And I reckon when I do map sessions with my investors, half the amount of time they go, I don't know what my goal is, I just want to buy property, right? They come to me, by the end of the conversation, we're like, okay, we need to get 5, we need to get 10, we need to get 15, 20. I was on a map session yesterday with someone, and I told them 20 properties, and they giggled. I heard the wife giggle in the background, right? It's like 20 properties, right? And I was like, yeah, you need 20 properties. It's like, fuck, we just want to get 2, right? And they came as a referral. So they hadn't followed, they didn't know all this stuff. And it seemed so foreign to them that they were being told, yeah, go and buy 20 properties, we'll get there in the next 5 years. And they were very debt resilient. They were like scared of debt because the debt is what they're used to having to pay that debt themselves, but not getting a tenant to pay that debt. So looking at, what the end goal is, what is your end goal? Like there's no, how long's a piece of string? I hate that answer. How long's a piece of string, right? But it does come down to that. So I don't have a little quick slide here today with this answer or this slide, but as for the answer, right? Like if you need 100 grand a year, I always use that, revert to that. If you need 100 grand, it's changed, right? 100 grand that rents for 100 grand that rents for $300 a week, you needed say 7 properties, that's 2,100 a week beforehand. But those 300 a week rents have now gone to $400 a week. So if you need $400 a week, you need 5 properties rent for $400 a week to get to 100 grand a year. So 100 grand a year is 2 grand a week. $2 grand a week divided by 400, you need 5 lots of that. So you need 5 properties to get 100 grand a year passive income. How much do those properties cost is one of the questions. And how do you get 5 properties unencumbered? It might mean that you buy 10 properties, they are 200 grand a piece, they double, go to 400 grand a piece, you sell off 5, pay the other 5. But no one calls me up and says, hey, Birch, I bought a property for 200, I sold it for 400, so happy, I did that 10 years ago. People call me up and they're like, fuck, I wish I didn't sell it, it's now worth 800,000, I wish I bought more, right? So that's a very basic strategy. Buying 5, working hard, paying it off is the dumbest thing anyone can do, because if you're working hard, paying them off, you buy 5 properties, 200 grand a piece, $1 million. You work for the next 20 years, earning 100 grand a year, paying 30, 40 grand in tax, living off, food stamps, paying those properties down to nothing. What you've done is you've paid a shitload of tax, you've sacrificed your life. The interest bill that you'll be saving at 6% is going to be less than inflation, right? So it's a really irrelevant thing. So the better one would be buying 10, they double, sell off half, pay the other half. But that's not good either. So my preferred method would be buy 10, and then once you've got those 10, with a combination of reducing interest rates as they come in and structuring your debt correctly, as well as increasing your rents. You push your rent up $100 a week, you've got 10 properties, there's $1,000 a week, there's 52 grand a year. We're halfway home, and you haven't paid off any debt. When you sell an asset, you lose that property, the growth and the rental potential in perpetuity for the rest of your life. But if you keep that property, then you've got the growth in that property in perpetuity, and you've got the cash flow going up in perpetuity, and that's the amazing part of it. So how many do you need? Work backwards from how much rent do you need, and how much income are you looking for, and how many properties do you need? And then work out a plan on what you need to do in order to get there. That's basically the basics of it. And then once you work out you need 5, 10, 15, 20, then work backwards and go, how am I going to get that? Say you need 20 properties, might seem daunting. Say you need 10, might sound daunting. But then it's like, okay, well, how do we break it down? We need to buy 3. Buy those 3 properties, got 100 grand, we go buy 2 deposits. Those 2 deposits, we go back in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, ask the team at Zinger Finance, hey, can we rip out some equity? We go rip out some equity, we go buy the next 2 or 3. We come back, pull equity from that. I'm not talking about any future growth. I'm just talking about recycling the equity that you've got there. People go, well, you buy property for 200, you get it revalued at 250, you pull out 50 grand worth of equity or 40 grand worth of equity. My loan went from, you buy it at 200, it's got a 160K loan at 80%, then you refinance it, you get a loan at 200, you're paying interest on the extra 40K at 200 grand. Well, what's the interest on 40 grand? Interest on 40 grand at 5% is 2 grand a year. Who gives a fuck, right? Push your rent up by $40 and you got it covered, right? So you get the new property, give you $40 a week positive cash flow, that's covering the equity you pulled out. Or you could go back and go, I'm going to save my way to prosperity, right? Said fucking no one ever, right? People don't save their way to wealth, right? They build wealth. I just thought of it just then, actually. People don't save their way, they build it. So if you have to save 40 grand, it's going to take you 20 years of saving 2 grand a year, right? $40 a week, it's going to take you 20 years. What is your $40,000 going to buy you in 20 years? Probably a fucking Big Mac meal, right? It's going to buy you nothing. Philippines, Rose, how much is food? What would a Big Mac meal cost there? I don't know. I don't know the currency.
I think it's very.
What would it be worth roughly?
Well, for every dollar is 38 pesos, right? I think food is very expensive there as well. It's all relative, right? Because their wages are also small. So even that.
What would a Big Mac meal cost you? 15, 20 bucks here?
It's probably like 500 pesos.
500 bucks?
Something like that. I don't know. I never.
And 20 years ago when you were a baby, Rose?
We don't have burgers.
No, so you didn't have burgers, right? But let's say, what would the average wage have been 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
Oh, my goodness me, it's probably 5,000 a month. Now they have like earning 40,000 a month. Yeah, right? So, yeah.
So the Philippines, I don't know anything about the currency over there. So
pesos.
It's crashed, right? Inflation's killed it, yeah?
Yes.
It's happened everywhere. It's happened everywhere. So with that debt, being able to collect the debt today and control those rents, like that's the situation I see happening with the currency here that we've seen in the Philippines or anywhere. Right?
Anywhere. Yeah.
I don't know anything about the economy. So yeah, we're over there. So when we can pay out 40 grand, someone works out that, so if someone had 40 grand 20 years ago, in the Philippines, they would have been well off. Yeah,
Yes.
turned that in a year.
Yeah.
But 40 grand now is just like nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
So if you work so hard, save your life savings of 40,000, that 40,000, you'd be like, you can retire, right? But now, it's nothing. That's what's happening here. In the year 2000, if we had 100 grand in the bank account, how would that have looked like? Here, 100 grand would be like, really, when someone goes, you're a millionaire, it's great, right?
Yeah.
You're a millionaire now, it's like, oh, okay, you can cover lunch today, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So that's my view on being able to retire from the workforce. So I guess looking at 2024, if you want to make 2024 your best year, Rose, what sort of things would you say here to make?
I think the 2024, if you're able, I would really wanting to purchase property at the moment, because this is
gone foggy again.
reason being, because this is like just based on behavior, I guess, like, the reason being, if I can afford, the reason being, I feel like the interest rate is not going to go up. It can only go down. Now, I want to make sure that I'm buying at the moment in the market, the purchase price didn't go up that much. I'm just a bit nervous that once the interest goes down, there will be the tendency that the price is going to go up. Would it be right?
It's happened throughout history.
Yeah. So I don't want to buy a higher price, right?
Yeah.
I want to bet the price by buying now, whilst the interest is, didn't go up, but it's only a matter of a few months, it can go down. You're talking about, like, say, for example, if October is my assumption that the interest can go down, so you're looking like March, April, May, June, you just have to sacrifice for the next 6 months in terms of what the current interest rate. After 6 months, the interest goes down, but then again, you may not be able to afford the purchase price.
Yeah.
So I think I'll make for 2024, if you're able, please, I think I would buy more. And then if you have existing properties, refi, harvest equity, whilst the price, the opportunity is there.
Things will look relatively cheap when we look back in the revision mirror. I had a chat with a good friend of mine, and you know him very well as well. He's a very devout Muslim, right? And he doesn't get any debt, right? I think you know who he is, without saying the name, right? We're going to go, right? This person doesn't get debt, right? They just, I think I've swung them around, and I think this year might be their year, right, for them to get into debt. And I remember saying in 2013, we had a day which was a bubble soccer, right? So people get those big balls, and they run around, play soccer, and they bump into each other. It was a team bonding thing. And he was there, and I was explaining about gold and silver. Someone just actually asked me about gold and silver, which I'll get to shortly. Keep the questions coming. And I said about debt becoming irrelevant with inflation, and I was like, debt will be the asset in the future. And surprise, surprise, when we look at 2024, being able to get debt is an asset, right? Your credit score is an asset. Your ability to take anything through inflation. So the debt becomes irrelevant with inflation. So whatever you can get your money into or your currency into, people want to save dollars. If we saved 100 grand in the year 2000, you'd be wealthy. 100 grand a day won't even get you a family car, right, off the dealership lot. So looking at your cash, it's going to lose its purchasing ability, but looking at the whatever you buy with the cash will go up and get inflated away. So debt becoming the asset, if you can leverage whatever that is, then you're going to be able to capitalize on the inflation much better than the person that isn't able to capitalize and being able to leverage that. And I think that's where, people understanding how debt works and how currency works and how finances work and how assets work. I'd love to sit here and tell you guys that I'm the best at what I do. Everything I touch with.
You are the best of what you do.
Look, I think
I can attest
I'm
to
very
that.
good with that, right? But I'm not the best at everything, right? Look at our slide deck, right? Our slide deck today is lovely, right? Look at this logo that we've got last year. Here's our, our color palette and all that stuff, right? It just which is nice, right? As we're going to become a bank one day, we need to enter into that phase of where we're taking our brand into, right? There's a whole story behind how this B has the little dot moves over and it looks cool there and all that. The minute I saw it, I was like, that's mad. Tell me the story about it, right? I would love to say that I did that. I didn't do shit. I appointed an advertising agency, a marketing agency to rebrand the business. I don't sit here and try and do the website. Could I make a website? I'm sure I could, right? I could, right? But I don't because it's not my best use of dollar, right? I can be a better investor than I could be better than a marketing person or whatever. And it's important to have the right people. So I could sit here and say, oh, I'm the best property investor and I can buy so many properties, right? But let me tell you, if I didn't have Rose sitting here beside me, I wouldn't have been able to build my portfolio because I wouldn't have had fucking money to build that portfolio. So your debt strategy needs to align with your purchasing strategy. And you need to make sure that you've got the right people to be able to get you to that result and the right structuring, the right vision. For me, the property's the easy part, right? I always say, oh, the property's the easy thing, but without the money, you can't buy it. So how are you going to plan for your escape in 2024? What does that look like? What is your business plan around your own personal life? So if you need help on that, you know where to find us.
I like what Jonah was saying there. There's always a way.
Yes, I saw that beforehand. I had a little giggle to myself, right? I had a little giggle to myself about that, right?
Yeah.
So with that, because you've helped them get some pretty cool results, right?
Yes.
And no one knows who Jono is. And John, he just wrote, she's the best. I was going to ask Jono and say, do you think that you would have been able to push the extra mile if it wasn't for Rose sitting there going, hey, what about this? What about that? And it's important to have the right.
He is a pleasure to work with, though, because he does follow your advice, or
Tremendous. The results our clients get are a reflection of how they carry themselves too, right?
Yes.
I've seen, I'll go back a few slides to mindset. I've seen people with so many opportunities and they can't do shit, right? Because their mind doesn't allow them to expand or move. They get fearful, they seize up, whatever. I've seen people that should have been written off and scrapped off and go, oh, you can't do anything. And then they're able to, go on and get 20 properties in 2 years. So, it's important, the mindset. So keep the questions coming through. I'm going to leave another slide up on the screen. Well, that's too far. This is if you want to book in a discovery session with the team, reach out to us, send us an email. If you want to get straight through to the Zinger line, I always read you the phone number, 1300 367 925. And I don't know what Zinger's phone number is. So I Googled it at the start, right? I Googled it at the start, and I've got the number here. Take a pen and paper. I'll read it out twice. I can't put it on the screen. Rose that's a call from a bank. There's a bank?
I don't know. Yeah, it could be.
I think it's a bank. It looks like yeah. So get your pens and pads ready and your phone, jot it down wherever. If you want to call straight through to Zinger, it's 1300 88 2022. It's 1300 88 2022. The details to book in a meeting with the team and to get in contact, just reach out. Luke just said here, hey Birchie, what should I do in 2024? Should I put a call into the team? Yes. If you're questioning it of what should you do, well then, it's all just a discussion. So book in. You
can also get into Zinger website. There's a calendar there. You can also book yourself an appointment there. I think that's also a good way to.
This link books an appointment, and the team will put you directly in contact with Zinger and book in their appointment, or you can go directly on that. But reach out from you guys registering for the webinar. If you're watching this live or you've registered, you don't even be watching live. If you've registered, the team will probably catch up with you sometime in the future, maybe give you a call or whatnot. But reach out to the team. You know where to find us, and lots of things that we can do. So I've got lots of questions coming from you guys, and I'm going to read through maybe for like 10, 15 minutes, answer through some of the questions, and we'll go from there. So thanks for those of you that are tuning out now. Thanks for tuning in, and spending your Wednesday night with us or whenever you're watching this. So I'm going to read this first question, which is the last one there, which is from Dion. What can you do with $1.2 million worth of equity? It's a loaded question. I've got a client.
What can we do?
I've got
Oh my God, a lot.
I've got a client which has been a dream to work with, and I said to him, he said he wanted 300 grand a year income, and I said you need 20 properties to get there. He said, how long will it take me to get to 20 properties? Right, I'm going to write a little name here so you know who I'm talking about.
I think I know, yeah.
That one?
Yes.
Yeah. So I said, for that 300 grand a year, you need 20 properties. And he goes, okay, how long will it take me to get there? And he had like about $500,000. And I said, if you do everything I tell you to do, I'll get you there in 2 years. He said, get me there in a year. And I was like, I can try, right? But people tell me they're going to do shit all the time and they don't do it. So let's just start the ball rolling and we'll see how we go. I got him 28 properties in his first year. That's on $500,000. I've got him up to about 40 properties now in the last 3 years. He's up to 40 properties. Then he get to 50 properties in the next year. The last 5 properties he bought were cash, and he started with $500,000. So, what's possible? We've had people get to 20 properties in 3 years, 19 properties in 3 years, with $80,000 starting position. These are within the last 2-3 years. So, yeah, it's awesome. Morgan says here, if you had 700 to 800K to invest now right now, where would you buy? I'd buy anywhere with the numbers stack up. It's a very large sort of question that you've got there, but the numbers have to stack up. So, we might spread it around to buy 3 properties at 300 grand a piece, 200 grand a piece in the portfolio. But yeah, wherever the numbers stack up. It's been in Mount Druitt back in the day. It's been the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is cooked. Right? Everything I was buying at 150, 200 is now 600 grand. People used to laugh at, why are you buying the Gold Coast? It's a joke. I started buying mining towns. I'm buying them at 50 grand. Now they're 300 grand, right? They've all gone up. I'm not spending 600 grand in the Gold Coast for a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit that I could buy 4 years ago for 150, 200K. So the markets are important and the value is important in the market, and the cash flow is important and the equity is important. I'll buy anywhere. For those, I've got a few little deals here that they're all done. So they're just deals in the last week that I've done. I've done 2 deals in Melbourne in the last week. Right? There was a bulk deal which had 12 units in it, and there was another deal which was another big deal. So I always said that Melbourne, I didn't see value there, but I'm starting to see in some pockets some value there. Am I going to buy heaps there? I don't know. Right? I might buy a little bit, but I've bought in every state, not territory, because you don't really own the land. You don't own the property in territories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the territory is the land's a leasehold land, and I like buying on the mainland. So I'm not a fan of Tasmania. If they were 20 grand a house like they were years ago, I'd buy them, but they're not. So I don't see the value in that. But yeah, there's value out there. There's deals out there. Doesn't matter what market. There's money to be had. I've thrown my shoulder out. There's something wrong with my shoulder, so I'm like a bit sore today. Zach here said, I have one property that I live in with about 350K equity, owing 850 on the loan. Do you think I should sell that to free up that cash so I can cover multiple buying fees and then hope roll the equity over to new properties, or just use the 100 grand that I have, don't withdraw to 80% instead of keep the current place? That's a good question. I don't know anything about your position, Zach, so I'm just going to go general on this, and I think you can fill in the gaps in your own personal position from that. There's times, I'm a big fan of 80% lends. There's times when I would go to 90% lend, right? One thing happens when you sell a property, you're up for sales fees, you're up for
this one is owner occupied.
If it's owner occupied, then that. Keep the questions coming in, folks. So you'd be up for capital gains tax, legal fees, stamp duties, buying new properties, stamp duties, all that sort of stuff. I would try and keep whatever properties I had as long as they're not costing you and bleeding you really badly, I'll try and keep as many properties as I can for as long as I could. And then I would reassess at a certain point if it gets in the way and I'm like, hang on a second, this property is 850K loan on it or whatever, and I can't get a loan anymore because it's hurting me servicing. If I was to sell it, I could buy $1.5 million worth of new property, then it would be a decision I'd make at that point. But if you can pull out the equity, I would take the equity first, personally, not giving financial advice, and use that equity to buy. And the worst case, you can sell that property off, because once you've sold the property, you've executed all the sale and all that, is gone forever, right? You can't go back and go, oh, we should sell it. It's fine, it's gone. So looking at it, with 100 grand, you could get started with 2 properties to get the ball rolling. You could refinance that property to 90% and get 4 deposits out of it by getting an extra 100 grand out of it. So if you're going to sell it anyway, well, then I'd probably sit there and go, well, I'll push it up as high as I could, get the equity out, and use that as my starting capital. And if I choose to sell it in the future, I can, but I'll still retain that option. So with property investing and business in general that I run, I always think about the multitude of options that I have. The more successful you are is based on the more options and choices you have in your day-to-day basis. And yeah, looking at it, you need to be able to have more options. And you sell it, that's cool, but you're cutting out other potentials there. So yeah. Question here, what are your thoughts on Townsville? I think Townsville's good, but I'm not saying it's the best area to invest in. I was buying in Townsville when there are 100 grand of property, right? I say that very loosely because I am very active in Townsville, but I don't have an area to go, that's where I'm going to put all my eggs in there. You know, there's value there to be had if you're buying the right assets, buying them at the right price, and getting the right cash flow for them. What is this next question? John said, build the best team around you. It's important. If your team's shit, you're going to be shit. So I've had shit people around me in my life, and they've caused shit for me. So yeah, I've had great people around me. I do great things with them. So you need all the people around you. It doesn't matter. You know, imagine you're a race car driver, and I don't know anything about it, but I've seen those. What's that McQueen show? That Cars show that kids play cars shows, right? And the kids watch the car spinning around a car track, right? And you see like a pit crew, right? They take the wheels off and all that stuff. If you're driving a race car and there's milliseconds between a race car, you know, one beating you or whatever, then your pit crew taking that wheel off, putting petrol in your tank is going to either make you be quicker or slower, lose the race by a second. So it's important to, you know, have those right people around you that are going to push you along to get you there. Scott says here, my Perth property has gone up 30K in the last 3 months, crazy times, buy. Exactly, right? We're in a time where, you know, things are just going up crazy. And this is in a recession. Like technically, I believe we're in a recession. And, you know, these things shouldn't be going up like they are, but they are. So, yeah. Question from Sam says, aside from buying a property portfolio, Birchie, what are your thoughts on small percentage worth of gold and silver and economic hedge? I'll get into that. I never talk about this, right? I'm not really going to get into it today, but I have, Rose got out of the screen here.
Because it's only you, right? Yeah.
I haven't pushed the table away. I don't get into it that often to talk about it, right? But I'm very well invested into that space, right? I've been buying gold and silver before I bought property, right? I just never really thought it was. I've talked about it and I've made videos and I've bought different items in and talked about it in camera and whatever. But I've never gone out and gone, okay, I've sold a property or I've got 100 grand, I'm going to go buy 100 grand of gold and silver today. I've only ever bought it when it's like, here's a grand, here's 2 grand. I feel like buying, I might be adventurous, I might buy 3 or 4 grand. I'll throw 500 bucks here, whatever. But I've collected that consistently over decades, right? So the position would be considered as a good position. But if I look at it, if I had 50K and I have the option of getting a loan, I ain't putting 50 grand in the gold or silver for two reasons. One, can't leverage it, right? You can get yourself an ETF, you can get yourself in a fund, but you don't own it, you don't hold it, you don't own it. So yeah, looking at it from that perspective, you want to own the physical. If you throw 50K into it, that's a deposit for another asset. So you can't leverage it. There's a deposit. You could buy a 300 grand property, 200 grand property, or you could buy a couple of pieces of gold and silver. So the value of them going up, they're heavily manipulated, but most importantly, they don't bring in cash flow. So you don't have cash flow coming from it. I'd rather have properties that bring me cash flow, and then every week, I've got a mate, and we've like talking about, like we compare things in gold and silver. There's a gold coin called a gold sovereign. They were around in the early 1900s. They were gone after the Confiscation Act in the 1930s. And they're not a coin of tender, but there was a coin that's called a gold sovereign. It's about a quarter ounce, 0.234 of an ounce of gold, right? Of real gold. It's 92.5% gold. And often to say, like we'll joke about something, it's like, there's a property or something, right? It's like, fuck, that thing there is going to bring in a solve a week, right? A sovereign. It's going to bring in 2 solves a week, right? And we use it as an exciting thing as a thing to joke about and talk about. I would rather have the assets that bring in the money to buy that stuff than to buy that stuff and hope and pray that it's going to go up. And if those things go up in value, everything's gone up in value, right? But those things are so heavily manipulated that your bread's gone up, your food's gone up, everything's gone up at a far greater rate than what it's just keeping up with inflation. So it's not really an investment as such, it's more just a bit of a hedge. And my goal and my view was to see some of my metal investments, let's call it, be able to pay out my debts during a hyperinflation so I didn't have to lose any cash flowing assets, right? So that's one of my things, but it's very speculative, very wild. I don't think you're going to become a millionaire from it, from buying, you could, right? Everyone's going to become a millionaire by owning a big pen, right? But I think that here we go. I don't even know what the fuck one of these things would sell for. What this would sell for, right? But I know that in 2024, me holding this pen, I'm going to go and say it's worth like $2, right? But 3 years ago, it's probably worth $1, right? You buy a packet of them, they're worth like $5. Now the packet's worth $10, right? So if this has doubled and silver is cheaper than what it was in 2011, it does appear as a good investment, but people in 1980, when it was $50, would be going, oh, it's a great investment, it's going to go up, and it still has never hit back to that level. And it is from manipulation or whatnot, but it is a massive risk. So I see these people that talk like I talk out there, who view the economy as I view it, but they're so invested in gold and silver, thinking it's going to be Lord Savior, but it's not because of manipulation. It could be worth a lot more, but it's not. So it's very, very speculative on that one. So that's my answer on that one. My shoulder's getting sore and sore. On that note, I think we should get going. I've got lots of questions here from you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, if you're one of our investors that we work with, I'll get my team to contact you. If you've got a number there, if you've got your name in that, don't then put your number. I think we might have it. Chuck your number if you want to call from us, whatever. But I'll get my team to reach out to you guys that wanting some assistance and guidance in that, and yeah, organise a chat. We'll go from there. So on that note, folks, I want to say thank you for tuning in to the first webinar of 2024. There will be more coming shortly. Thanks for trusting us with what we do, and wanting our input and spending your time with us. If you need help with anything, the details are there on the screen. Reach out to us. We help people build cool portfolios, do cool things, and yeah, keep educating with interesting topics for you guys. So thanks for watching. Thanks for spending your time with us. Have a great evening, and bye for now.
Good night.
See you.